Blended learning for elementary teachers. On today's agenda, we're going to take a look at what is blended learning, the advantages of blended learning, the blended learning process, and its implementation. So what is blended learning? Blended learning is any formal learning program where students learn in part in an online setting with some control over time, place, path, and/or pace. So it means an instructional shift from face-to-face instruction to a built-in model where web-based instruction and content occur. So blended learning in and of itself differs from technology-rich instruction in that technology in the blended learning environment is actually used to leverage learning opportunities for personalization, while tech-rich environments allow technology to simply enhance the learning experience. There are 4 different blended learning models. So to start, there is the rotation model. In the rotation model, students rotate on a fixed schedule within the same environment between online and face-to-face instruction. Then we have the flex model. In the flex model, learning is primarily online and the teacher offers support based on need. So ultimately, the teacher in the flex model is responding to the online part of student learning in a flexible manner. Next, we have the enriched virtual model, which is where learning is primarily done online, and there are a few required face-to-face learning sessions in this model. So these sessions may be once a month, once a week, but they are required, and then everything else is done online. And then finally, in the a la carte model for blended learning, courses are offered both online and on campus, and learning is primarily online and supported with those on-campus activities. So what are the advantages of blended learning then? Well, to start, the first advantage of blended learning is that there is an increased student engagement. So because learning is interest-based and students are learning through exploration, they are more likely to be engaged in their learning process. They also receive engagement through autonomous learning where they have control over time, place, path, and/or pace of their learning. Another advantage is flexibility. So in blended learning, learning can take place anytime and anywhere. That also allows for teachers to address a variety of learning styles in blended learning. And learning is also student-paced, so there's flexibility in terms of time. Then finally, another advantage of the blended learning environment is that there is real-world application. So students are utilizing research skills and are also developing in a self-driven manner. So student motivation is intrinsic based off of interest, and then students are also allowed to make decisions in their learning and be responsible for those decisions that they're making. So all of these things are just a few of the advantages of blended learning. Next, we're going to take a look at why blended learning actually works in classrooms.
5 reasons why blended learning works. What is blended learning? It is the combination of different learning techniques. In standard educational models, blended learning often refers to the use of laboratory equipment or computers to complement the class sessions and strengthen the teaching process. When it comes to e-learning model, blended learning offers benefits on a broad scale. To name a few, self-paced learning, testing, and quizzing, monitoring, and feedback. But how does blended learning make users experience better? First, learner is more engaged using a variety of content types. Pictures are easier to understand. One picture equals 1,000 words, and practical examples work the best. Second, different learners have different learning style. Diversifying your teaching methods is a good way to approach the problems that arise when you offer an online course. Blended learning allows for students to take information home and have their own time to understand it without the pressure of keeping up with the rest of the class. Consider quizzing and testing online that allows trainers to have more time to educate in the physical classroom environment. Third, instructor has the ability to assess learner trends and act accordingly. E-learning is very appealing to instructors as it allows updating and tweaking the material on the fly. Also, reporting is a useful tool because it represents a graphical information found within the LMS. It's also a good way to have a quick overview of learners' progress. 4. It improves feedback, which is both valuable for a trainer and for a learner. It's important to allow the trainer to have both the right tools and time to prepare feedback to learner performance as much as possible, spending as little time as possible. 5. It can make learning fun. It doesn't mean that learning should be set aside, but the combination of the two through the usage of different and more interactive materials will be very effective. The overall result should be to allow the learners to have access to information from anywhere, encouraging them to take learning into their own hands and enjoy the process by doing something interesting. This animation is brought to you by Talent LMS.
So as you can see then, blended learning works because our learners are more engaged. Differentiation is the key driving force for blended learning. Teachers can respond effectively to student learning. Feedback is improved, and it makes learning fun. So let's look at the blended learning process then. There are 4 components to the blended learning process. To start, we'll look at face-to-face aspect of learning. So as we're considering face-to-face learning in the blended learning context, we're looking at what is the model that we're choosing to use for blended learning, how often do we plan to meet whole group, and then what is the purpose of that face-to-face meeting. Then as we explore the online learning design, we're considering what are the goals or learning objectives for our students, what content will help the students address those learning goals, how are we allowing for differentiation, and then how are we assessing the student learning that is occurring online. In the small group rotation part of the process, we're looking at differentiation. So are small groups being pulled as needed or are they required? And then is it a scheduled rotation or is it discretionary, meaning based on performance outcomes from the online learning aspect of the blended learning environment? And finally, then we're looking at collaboration. So how will students network their learning with one another? Are they going to collaborate in Google Docs or Google Slides? Are they going to create videos of new information that they're getting from their learning and sharing those? And then how are they going to disseminate information to each other as they're learning? So is there going to be a learning management system? If so, what is that system that we're choosing to use? For example, Google Classroom. And then finally, just taking a look at this mini guide to implementation. So when it comes to blended learning and its implementation, there's a few tips and tricks that we want to focus on. The first tip is to just start small. So maybe you're only implementing blended learning in one subject area, maybe 1 or 2 days a week until you start to get the hang of it. Next, when we're planning for blended learning, we're beginning with the end in mind. So what is the goal of the learning and how are we going to ensure that our students are meeting those goals? Then we're also establishing our expectations with students. So what are our rules? What are our procedures? What type of schedule might we keep in order to rotate through small groups or through whole group instruction? How are we going to make it consistent for our learners, especially at the elementary level, considering that students really need a lot of consistency in the classroom? Also, we're going to kind of use this little tip to use our data when we're planning for instruction in this blended learning environment. So in order to respond to students' needs, we're looking at data consistently, helping us gauge whether things are working or not working. And if they are working, what are we going to do to continue to enhance that learning? And if they're not, what adjustments are we going to make? Also, we're looking at collaborating with others. So definitely use your tech coach when it comes to needing assistance in implementing blended learning, or if you know of other teachers who have successfully implemented blended learning, how can you use what they know to help you? And then finally, we're reflecting and making changes consistently, just as good teachers. So if it's working, what do we do to enhance that? And if it's not, what are we going to fix? So just remember, when it comes to blended learning, the key to success is action, and the essential in action is perseverance.